The warning lights flashed red across Luna Station's command center as Commander Lee Hyun stared at the incoming signal data. For 3 days, the deep space monitoring arrays had been picking up something impossible, a transmission from beyond. The edge of known space, pulsing with mathematical precision that could only mean one thing: intelligence. "Sir, the pattern is getting stronger," reported Lieutenant Park Sumi, her voice tight with excitement and fear. She had been working without sleep since the signal first appeared, her fingers dancing across holographic displays that showed wave patterns unlike anything in Earth's databases. "This isn't random cosmic noise. Someone is trying to talk to us." Lehan moved closer to the main display, watching the alien frequencies cascade across the screen like a waterfall of light. The transmission had been broadcasting continuously for 72 hours, growing weaker with each repetition. Whatever was sending this message was running out of power, running out of time. "Give me Dr. Kim Dae-yoon from the Xenolinguistics Department," Lee Hyun ordered. "Tell him to drop everything and get up here now. And send word to Earth Command. They need to know about this immediately." Within 6 hours, Luna Station's quiet research facility had transformed into a bustling center of activity. Scientists, military analysts, and communication specialists worked side by side, all focused on cracking the mystery of the alien transmission. Dr. Kim Dae-yoon led the translation team. His expertise in pattern recognition and linguistic structures proving invaluable as they slowly began to understand what they were hearing. "It's not just a message," Kim Dae-yoon explained to the assembled team, his face pale from exhaustion and shock. "It's an entire civilization compressed into quantum frequencies. History, science, art, literature, everything they ever were is contained in this signal." The translation software worked around the clock, artificial intelligence systems, learning the alien language structure faster than any human could. What emerged from the decoded transmission was a story of unimaginable tragedy. The Kethfer Collective had once been a thriving civilization spanning dozens of star systems. Their crystalline cities had stood for millions of years, their culture built on harmony and peaceful cooperation. But something had found them in the darkness between stars. The Devourers, mechanical beings that consumed all organic matter, turning living worlds into raw materials for their endless reproduction. World after world had fallen to the plague of metal and circuits. The Kethfer had fought bravely, but their peaceful nature had not prepared them for such relentless destruction. "They're not asking for rescue," Kim Dae-yoon said quietly, reading the translated text with growing horror. "They know it's too late for them. They're asking us to remember. They want someone, somewhere in the universe, to know that they existed." The final parts of the transmission contained something even more heartbreaking: coordinates to scattered refugee ships. The last survivors of a billion-year-old civilization drifting through space with no hope of survival. These ships carried the final Kethfer, perhaps a few thousand individuals from a species that had once numbered in the billions. Lieutenant Park Sumi discovered the technical specifications hidden within the cultural data. The Devourers were not just mindless machines, they were intelligent, adaptive, and utterly without mercy. They learned from each battle, evolved new strategies, and never stopped hunting. The Kethfer had managed to slow them down, but stopping them seemed impossible. "The Devourers don't just kill," she reported to Commander Lee Hyun. "They study their victims, incorporate useful biological traits into their own designs, and use that knowledge to hunt other species more effectively. Every civilization they destroy makes them stronger." The implications were terrifying. If the Devourers had consumed the Kethfer, they would eventually spread throughout the galaxy. No species would be safe. Earth itself might someday face the same mechanical plague that had destroyed countless worlds, but buried within the Kethfer's cultural database was something unexpected, detailed. Information about other surviving species scattered across nearby star systems. The galaxy was not empty. Civilizations were hiding, running, desperately avoiding the attention of the Devourers, while hoping someone might find a way to stop the mechanical plague. As the transmission finally faded into silence, its power source exhausted, Commander, Lee Hyun made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. He opened a secure channel to Earth Command and spoke words that would echo through the halls of power on every human world. This is Luna Station to Earth Command. Have confirmed alien contact. Multiple species are facing extinction from a mechanical threat. Request immediate consultation with the United Colonial Command. The situation requires military intervention. Dr. Kim Dae-yoon looked up from his translation work, understanding the implications of those words. Earth had never encountered aliens before, but their first contact would not be peaceful exploration or scientific exchange. It would be war. The HFY had sent their final signal, expecting nothing but silence in return. They could not have imagined that their message would reach a species that had spent its entire history fighting against extinction, species that had learned to turn desperation into strength, fear into fury, and impossible odds into hard-won victories. Earth had received the message. Now Earth would answer. Admiral Choi Min-ho stood in the war room beneath Geneva, surrounded by holographic displays showing the largest military mobilization in human history. The emergency session of the United Colonial Command had lasted 18 SOAN hours, with heated debates echoing through the chamber as politicians and generals argued about humanity's response to the alien crisis. "This is madness," declared Senator Williams from the Mars colony, his voice crackling through the communication system. "We're talking about risking our entire species for aliens we've never met.
Always.
The logical response is to strengthen our defenses and prepare for the worst." But Admiral Choi Min-ho had already made his decision. He turned to face the assembled military commanders, his weathered face showing the determination that had carried him through the Titan Rebellion and the brutal campaigns in the Outer Rim. "Gentlemen, we've spent the last 2 decades fighting each other over mining rights in colonial territories," he said, his voice cutting through the political noise. "We have the chance to fight for something that actually matters. The HFY sent us their final message because they believed someone should know they existed. I say we prove them wrong about it being final." Captain Yoon Gi-won, commanding officer of the battlecruiser Determination, reviewed the fleet composition on her personal display. 200 warships pulled from every human military force: Earth Defense Fleet, Colonial Security, Outer Rim, Patrol, and even converted civilian vessels armed with military-grade weapons. It was an impossible gathering of ships and personnel that had never worked together before. "The logistics alone are a nightmare," she reported to Admiral Choi Min-ho during their final briefing. "We have crews speaking 12 different languages, using equipment from 6 different manufacturers, and following combat doctrines that sometimes contradict each other. This fleet should fall apart before we even leave Sol System." But something remarkable was happening in the preparation phase. Word had spread through the military networks about the alien transmission and the dying HFY civilization. Veterans from the bloodiest campaigns in human history were volunteering for the mission. Soldiers who had fought against each other in colonial wars were now working side by side, united by something larger than their old conflicts. Colonel Nam Tae-yoon assembled his Marine battalions in the massive hangar bay of the flagship Vengeance. These were not fresh recruits looking for adventure. They were hardened veterans who understood the true cost of war. Men and women who had seen friends die on hostile worlds, who had fought in the vacuum of space and the crushing gravity of heavy worlds. "Listen up," Nam Tae-yeon addressed the gathered troops, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had led men through hell and brought them home. "The intelligence reports tell us these devourers are unlike anything we've faced before. They adapt to our tactics, they learn from our mistakes, and they never stop coming. But here's what they don't know about humans. We've been fighting extinction since our ancestors picked up rocks to defend their caves. We're still here." The Marines responded with a roar of approval that echoed through the ship's corridors. These soldiers had volunteered knowing they might never see Earth again. But they believed in the mission with a faith that surprised even their commanders. Private Lee Dong-wook, barely 20 years old, but already a veteran of the Europa mining conflicts, wrote a letter to his family before the fleet departed. His words captured the spirit that was driving humanity toward the stars. "I know you don't understand why I'm going. The politicians call it foolish, the media calls it suicide. But when I heard that alien message, I heard something familiar. I heard people asking for help, and I can't ignore that. If we don't help them, who will? The technical challenges were enormous. Human weapons had been designed to fight other humans, not mechanical beings that could rebuild themselves from raw materials. Engineering teams worked around the clock to modify plasma rifles, redesign explosive charges, develop new ammunition types that might prove effective against the Devers. Dr. Park Sooni led the research team studying the Kethver technical data, searching for weaknesses in the Devourer design. What she found was both encouraging and terrifying. The mechanical beings were incredibly sophisticated, but they followed predictable patterns based on efficiency and resource conservation. They're not creative, she explained to the military. Planners. They adapt and improve, but they don't innovate. They've never faced an opponent that fights with human unpredictability and tactical flexibility. That might be our only advantage. As the fleet prepared for departure, Admiral Choi Min-ho received a final message from Earth Command. The politicians had voted to officially condemn the mission, declaring it an unauthorized use of military resources. The Admiral's response was, broadcast on all military frequencies throughout the solar system. This is Admiral Choi Min-ho to all human forces. Today we depart for the unknown. Not as representatives of any government or political system, but as representatives of the human spirit. The Kethver believed their final signal would be answered only by silence. Let's prove them wrong. Massive fleet began its journey toward the coordinates provided in the alien transmission, carrying 30,000 human souls toward a war that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. They were going to save strangers, fight monsters, and prove that some things were worth dying for. Earth had heard the call for help. Now Earth was answering with soldiers. Captain Bae Min-jae stood on the bridge of the strike cruiser Determination. Staring at the massive alien vessel floating dead in space, the Kethver refugee ship called Harmony of Spheres was unlike anything inhuman, engineering a beautiful crystalline structure that seemed to grow rather than be built its surfaces, catching starlight and throwing it back in patterns that almost looked like music made visible. Sir, we're picking up life signs, reported Lieutenant Oh Sulji from her sensor station. Approximately 3,000 individuals aboard the alien vessel. Their power systems are failing. Life support is running on emergency backup. They don't have long. The human fleet had taken 2 months to reach the first set of coordinates from the Kethver transmission. During the journey, the translation teams had worked to improve their understanding of the alien language, preparing for humanity's first contact with another intelligent species. But nothing could have prepared them for actually seeing a ship full of dying aliens. Open a communication channel, Captain Bae, Min-jae ordered. Use the translation protocols Dr. Kim developed. Let them know we're here to help. The response came as harmonic vibrations that the ship's computers slowly converted into understandable speech. The voice that emerged was musical, beautiful, and filled with disbelief. You, ... came the alien said, identifying itself as Harmony of Deep Currents. We sent our final song into the void, expecting only silence. But you are here. How is this possible? Captain Bae Min-jae had rehearsed this moment during the long journey, but facing actual aliens made his prepared words feel inadequate. We received your message. We came to help. We're going to get you to safety. The first meeting took place in Determination's cargo bay, hastily converted into a diplomatic chamber. The human delegation included Captain Bae Min-jae, Dr. Park Ji-young as a medical officer, and Sergeant Lim Sun-ho, representing the Marine security team. They waited nervously as the alien shuttle docked with their ship. The Kethver who emerged were breathtaking. 3 beings that looked like living crystal formations, each about 3 meters tall, their bodies resonating with soft musical tones that served as their natural communication. They moved with grace that seemed impossible for creatures made of what appeared to be solid mineral. You are so small, Harmony of Deep Currents observed, its crystalline form pulsing with colors that the translation system indicated meant surprise. So fragile, your life signs are weak compared to ours. How do you expect to fight the Devourers? Dr. Park Ji-young stepped forward, her medical scanner recording the alien biology. We may be small, but we've survived on a world that tried to kill us for millions of years. We've learned to be tough. The Kethfer delegation seemed confused by human confidence. They had been running from the Devourers for centuries, their entire culture shaped by the need to hide and survive. The concept of actually fighting back seemed foreign to them. The Devourers cannot be defeated. Another Kethfer, calling itself Song of Distant Stars, vibrated sadly. They learn from every battle. They adapt to every weapon. They turn our own strengths against us. We have tried. Fighting, we have always lost. Captain Binge was about to respond when the ship's alarm system began screaming. Red lights flashed throughout the cargo bay as Lieutenant Osulji's voice echoed over the communication system. Captain, we have incoming hostiles. Multiple contacts approaching fast. They match the profiles Dr. Kim developed for Devourer attack units. The Kethfer immediately began making sounds that the translation system rendered as prayers or death songs. They had experienced Devourer attacks before and knew what was coming, but the humans reacted differently. General quarters, Captain Binge ordered calmly. All hands to battle stations. Marine teams prepare for boarding action. Darjin. Lim Sunho was already moving, his plasma rifle materializing in his hands as if by magic. Sir, requesting permission to board the alien vessel and establish defensive positions? Granted. Take your best people and keep those civilians alive. Within minutes, human Marines were crossing between the ships, their combat armor sealing against the vacuum of space. The Kethfer watched in amazement as these small aliens moved with military precision toward certain danger. The Devourers hit the refugee ship like a plague of mechanical locusts. Spider-like constructs with multiple limbs and glowing sensor arrays swarmed through the crystalline corridors. Their purpose clear: consume all organic matter and add it to their collective mass. The Kethfer crew huddled in their command center, resigned to death. They had seen this happen dozens of times before. The Devourers would tear through their ship, dissolve their bodies for raw materials, add their knowledge to the collective database. But then they heard something impossible: human voices. Shouting in the corridors, the sharp crack of energy weapons, and the sound of explosions as Marines fought back against the mechanical horrors. Contact left, covering fire. Sergeant Lim. Sunho's voice echoed through the ship as his squad engaged the Devourers in brutal close combat. Private. Kim Taejin threw himself between a group of Kethver children and a Devourer attack unit, his rifle cutting through mechanical limbs with precise bursts of plasma energy. When his ammunition ran out, he drew his combat knife and continued fighting. The battle lasted 3 hours. When the last Devourer fell, 15 humans lay dead in the crystalline corridors of the alien ship. But every single Kethver civilian had survived. Harmony of Deep Currents found Captain Binge standing over the bodies of his fallen Marines. The human's uniform torn and bloodied, but his expression calm. Now you know what humans do, Captain Binge said quietly. News of humanity's first victory against the Devourers spread through the galaxy's hidden networks faster than light itself. Species that had been hiding in the darkness for centuries began transmitting desperate messages toward the human fleet, their coordinates flickering across subspace like beacons of hope in an endless night. Colonel Hangun studied the tactical display in her command center aboard the assault carrier Defiance. Battle Group 7 had been assigned to investigate a distress signal from the Kethver agricultural world called Growing Season Prime. The planet had fallen to the Devourers 3 months ago, but scattered survivors were still broadcasting from hidden shelters deep underground. Intelligence reports indicate the enemy has established a major processing facility on the surface, reported Major Song Minho, her second in command. They're converting the entire planetary ecosystem into raw materials. If we don't act soon, there won't be anything left to save. Han Gun had fought in some of humanity's bloodiest conflicts: the Titan Rebellion, the Europa mining wars, the brutal pacification campaigns on the Rim worlds. She understood that war was about more than just tactics and firepower. It was about the will to keep fighting when everything went wrong. Devourers have had 3 months to study our combat footage from the refugee ship battle, she told her battalion commanders during the pre-assault briefing. They're building countermeasures specifically designed to fight humans. They've learned our weaknesses and adapted their tactics. Good. That means we're winning.
Ow.
The planet below looked like a vision of hell, where once there had been vast crystalline farms growing food for millions of Kethfer. Now there were only mechanical processing plants stretching to the horizon. Huge devourer constructs moved across the landscape like metal mountains, consuming everything in their path and excreting building materials for even larger machines. Captain Gli Jinwu led the first wave of Marines down to the planet's surface in heavily armored dropships. The landing zone was supposed to be clear, but devourer forces were waiting for them. New variants of the mechanical beings emerged from hidden positions, sleeker, faster designs with armor specifically configured to resist human plasma weapons. They're using our own tactics against us, Private Park Geo observed as her squad took cover behind the wreckage of their dropship. Look at how they're moving. That's human small unit tactics. The Devourers had indeed been studying human combat methods. They moved in coordinated teams, used suppressing fire to pin down Marine squads, and even attempted flanking maneuvers. But they had missed something crucial about human warfare, the ability to adapt faster than any enemy could anticipate. Sergeant Kim Haijin found herself cut off from her unit with only 3 Marines and a squad of Kethfer civilians they had, rescued from an underground shelter. The Devourers had surrounded their position, methodically closing in with the patience of machines that never tired or felt fear. Sarge, we're down to our last power cells, reported Corporal Yoon Jaeon, checking his weapons energy display. Maybe 10 minutes of continuous fire left. Kim Haijin looked at the terrified Kethfer huddled behind makeshift barricades. These aliens had never seen humans fight before, had never witnessed the stubborn refusal to surrender that characterized humanity's approach to impossible odds. Then we make those 10 minutes count, she said, chambering a fresh power cell in her rifle. Remember what Colonel Han told us? The Devourers think like machines. They calculate odds and make logical decisions. They don't understand crazy. Happened next became legend among the surviving Kethfer. Instead of waiting for the Devourers to close their trap, Kim Haijin led her 3 Marines in a direct assault on the enemy position. They charged across open ground toward overwhelming numbers, their battle cries echoing across the devastated landscape. The Devourers, programmed to expect logical tactical decisions, were unprepared for an attack that made no mathematical sense. In their confusion, they failed to coordinate their response effectively. Kim Haijin's squad broke through their lines and reached the civilians, creating an escape route through sheer audacity. Private Lee Dongwook died holding a strategic choke point. That allowed 200 Kethfer to reach the evacuation ships. Corporal Park Geo stayed behind to detonate explosive charges that brought down a Devourer processing plant, taking herself and 50 enemy units with her. These sacrifices were not meaningless gestures. They were calculated decisions made by soldiers who understood that sometimes winning required paying the ultimate price. The battle for growing season prime lasted 6 days. When it ended, the human forces had suffered 60% casualties, but the planet was free. The surviving Kethfer watched in amazement as humans worked alongside their own engineers to begin rebuilding what the Devourers had destroyed. We had forgotten what courage looked like, Harmony of Deep Currents told Colonel Hangun during the victory ceremony. Your people fight not for conquest or resources, but for principles we thought had died with our ancestors. Word of the victory reached other species hiding throughout the galaxy. The Zillinary insectoid beings who had been refugees for 2 centuries transmitted a message to the human fleet. We have watched you fight the metal death. We had given up hope, but you have shown us that hope is a choice. Teach us to be brave. Again, Captain Song Minho, commanding the destroyer Retribution, received similar messages from a dozen other species. The galaxy was awakening from its long nightmare, inspired by the sight of humans who refused to accept that extinction was inevitable. The war was spreading. But so was something the Devourers could never understand, the infectious nature of hope itself. The Devourer homeworld hung in space like a mechanical cancer, its surface covered with processing facilities that stretched beyond the horizon. Admiral Choi Minho stood on the bridge of the flagship Vengeance, watching the largest fleet in galactic history prepare for the final assault. Human warships flew alongside vessels from 30 different species who had found their courage watching humans fight. All ships. This is Admiral Choi Minho. He broadcast across the combined fleet. Today, we end the Devourers forever. Not for glory, not for conquest, but because every species in this galaxy deserves the chance to write their own story. The response came in dozens of languages, human voices mixing with Kethver harmonics, zillinary clicking sounds, and the deep rumbles of the stone-like Morden. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy's children were fighting together instead of hiding alone. Captain Lee Soman commanded the assault carrier Determination. Her ship loaded with Marines from 6 different species. The sight of humans training alien warriors had become common throughout the fleet. Colonel Nam Taeon had spent months teaching other species how to fight like humans, not just tactics and weapons, but the mindset that made victory possible. Against impossible odds, remember what we learned? Nam Taeon told his mixed species assault team as they prepared for the drop. The Devourers think like machines, they calculate probabilities, and make logical choices. But we don't fight with logic, we fight with heart. The battle began with a coordinated strike on the planet's orbital defenses. Devourer platforms the size of small moons opened fire with weapons that could crack asteroids, but the Allied fleet pressed forward. Human tactics had spread throughout the Allied forces instead of formal battle lines. The ships moved in small groups, using unpredictable attack patterns that confused the mechanical defenders. Major Kim Hae-jin led the final ground assault on the planet's core processing center. Her battalion included humans, Kethver, Zillinari, and members of species that had been enemies just months before. They had learned to fight together, each species contributing their unique strengths to the common cause. The Devourer. Queen Mind waited in the deepest part of the facility. A massive mechanical intelligence that had orchestrated the destruction of countless worlds. It was surrounded by layers of defenses that had been built over millions of years, each one designed to be absolutely impenetrable. "Sir, we're taking heavy casualties," reported Sergeant Yoon Jae-yoon as his squad fought through waves of Devour. "Defenders, these aren't the same units we faced before. They're bigger, faster, and they're using tactics we've never seen." Kim Hae-jin studied the tactical display, watching as red icons representing her soldiers disappeared one by one. Half her forces were already gone, and they hadn't even reached the Queen Mind's chamber. By any logical calculation, the mission was doomed. But humans had never been good at logical calculations when it came to impossible situations. "All units, this is Major Kim Hae-jin," she broadcast to her remaining forces. "We came here to end a plague that has terrorized the galaxy. For millions of years, we're not leaving until the job is done." For the Kethber who sent that first message, for every species that refused to give up hope, the final assault was chaos beyond description. Human Marines charged through corridors filled with mechanical horrors, supported by Kethver, whose crystalline bodies could absorb energy attacks, and Zillinari, whose natural armor could deflect the heaviest weapons. Species that had spent centuries hiding from the Devourers now fought alongside the humans who had taught them courage. Private Park Geo died protecting a group of wounded aliens. Her body torn apart by Devourer claws, but her sacrifice buying precious time for the medics. Corporal Lee Dong-wook held a critical choke point against impossible odds, his ammunition finally running out just as reinforcements arrived to continue the advance. The Queen Mind itself was a structure the size of a building, its mechanical intelligence processing battle data from across the galaxy. It had learned everything there was to know about human tactics, had adapted to every strategy the Allied forces had used. But it had never encountered anything like what Kim Hae-jin did next. Instead of attacking the Queen Mind directly, she turned to the explosive charges her team had been carrying. These weren't meant to destroy the facility, they were meant to collapse the entire underground complex, burying the Queen Mind under millions of tons of rock and metal. "This is for everyone who never gave up," she said, her finger hovering over the detonation switch. "This is for everyone who believed that hope was stronger than fear." The explosion that followed could be seen from orbit, a brilliant flash that marked the end of a billion-year plague. The Queen Mind's death sent shockwaves through every Devourer unit in the galaxy. Their mechanical unity shattered without their central intelligence. In the aftermath, as rescue ships collected survivors and medical teams treated the wounded, something unprecedented happened. The galaxy's surviving species established the Memorial Covenant, an alliance dedicated to ensuring no species would ever face extinction alone. The Kethver, saved from oblivion, became humanity's first true partners among the stars. Their crystalline cities began to sing again. But now their harmony spoke of hope rather than despair. And across the galaxy, when children of 100 different species asked why the stars were safe, their elders would tell them about Earth's answer to a dying civilization's final message. The humans hadn't sent diplomats or scientists. They had sent soldiers,